Hello YouTube! Today I will demonstrate on how to replace CV axle on this 2010 Toyota Tacoma. My truck has torn CV boot on both the driver and passenger side. Instead of replacing the boots, I decided to replace the entire axle. Here we have on the passenger side, we can clearly see there's a giant hole in the CV boot, and pretty much all the fluid is now emptied. And we go to the driver's side. Again, right there we see a giant open wound. Here's my replacement part. They're brand new CV axle purchased from O'Reilly Auto Parts. They cost around $70 each. Let's zoom in. This side of the axle goes into the differential, and this side goes onto the wheel. We want to take out this cotter pin and unscrew this nut. Taking out the cotter pin is pretty easy. Just need to straighten up with this plier, and then we can use hand and just pull it up. Next, we want to take out this 35mm bolt. For this job, I'm using 35mm deep socket with 1/2" drive. I used a wrecking bar to hold the wheel in position. Then I can use a brake bar to loosen this 35mm nut. We want to give it a tap to loosen the axle from the wheel assembly. Next, over on this side, we want to separate the wheel assembly from the tie rod. For this job, we're going to loosen one bolt here. I'm using 17mm socket. By the way, I already took out the cotter pin. After loosening the tie rod, we're now going to use the tie rod separator and then slide it to push this thing out to separate the tie rod from the wheel assembly. See, now it's completely loose. Next, come over this way. Underneath the wheel, we see two 19mm bolts. These will have to come off to separate the knuckles. This should pop right up. Now it's time to install our new axle. But first, we're going to look at the instruction. Caution, it says here, center C-clip onboard housing with grease before installation. Alright, it's the next day. I installed the new axle. I'll tell you, getting the new axle into the wheel hub wasn't an easy job for one person. You really need two people. One person to pull apart the wheel hub another person slide this axle in through the hole. Let's have a look. Here we see is my new axle. This is the lower CV boot and this is upper CV boot. The next thing to do is we want to install the tie rod and put back the knuckle. Here we go. Getting the tie rod and knuckle installed was fairly straightforward. Here you see is a tie rod, and underneath there, that's a knuckle. I also installed the 25mm center nut. To gain access to the axle nut, we need to take out this dust cap. For this job, I'm going to be using a chisel to get an opening from the edges. Then I'm going to use a screwdriver and then just pry it out from the edges. Now we're going to undo the 35mm axle nut. Make sure you have something to lock the wheel. 1, 2, 3. It's pretty tight. 1, 2, 3. Okay, it's loose. Next, over on this side, we're gonna take out this tie rod bolt. First, pull out the cotter pin after straightening it. Then use a 19mm wrench to take out this screw. To separate the tie rod from this joint, I'm going to use 11/16 wrench with a tie rod separator tool. Use a hammer. Okay. Now this should be loose. Over by the ball joint, we see two 19mm bolts. These had to come off. I'm gonna use a brake bar to, wow, it sounds pretty tight. There you go. Now this whole piece should just come off. So I removed and installed the new axle. The process was fairly straightforward. One critical step is when you are removing the axle, you need another person to help you. One person using two hands lift up the wheel assembly, another person from the inside push out the axle. Same thing applies when you are installing the axle. You need one person to help you there. When you are sliding the axle through the differential, be sure to apply some grease to the C-clip on the axle. This will make it a lot easier when sliding the axle into the differential. Make sure you tighten to a snug. The next thing to do is put on the dust cap. So we install the new axles, driver and passenger side. In the process, there are a bunch of oil leaked out. So we're gonna have to fill in more differential oil. For this job, we're first gonna take out the fill plug. Then we're gonna have to take out the drain plug. To take out the fill plug, I'm going to be using number 10 Allen. Okay, getting the drain plug out was extremely difficult. My torque wrench just didn't get enough drive. So I end up using a regular number 10 Allen wrench with a hammer. So now we're ready to catch all the oil. Have your pan ready. Whoa, there you go. Once all the oil is emptied, we can reseal the tank. First, plug back in the drain plug. Use number 10 Allen wrench. Be sure to get in there snug. Okay, it's pretty good. We don't want it to be too tight. Once the drain plug is sealed, we can now fill the tank with more oil. For this job, I'm refilling with 75 W90 gear oil using a transfer pump. We're gonna fill 1.6 liter according to the manufacturer suggestion.